Hello Master and welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at the concept of it's not actually about me as a healing tool and as a tool for transcending this idea that consensus reality is rejecting who we are and what is fundamental to us because it is actually bad and because it is actually wrong. And we're going to start to understand that a lot of the rejection that we experienced, the antagonism, the being told this is and this isn't the right way to be, and this is what we have to do and what we don't have to do, wasn't actually about us. It wasn't actually about us. It's not that we're being rejected because something is actually wrong with how we are. It's not that we're being rejected because society or culture or even our caregivers are fully all-knowing about what is truly good and what is truly bad, and they're projecting that onto us to help us understand what is truly good and truly bad in terms of what will actually help us get our needs met and help us get what we want and avoid what we don't want, but rather it's coming from a misunderstanding. It's coming from a projection. It's coming from false understandings of how reality works. And therefore, it's not actually true that we are being rejected for who and what we are. It's not actually true that what was rejected in us was a clear, this is a bad thing, and I'm trying to help you understand how that is a bad thing. Or this is a good thing, and I'm trying to help you understand how this is a good thing, and you have to change yourself in some fundamental way to live up to that. How that was never true. Because this is what we need to start to understand about consensus reality, is that any time we're being told that a fundamental part of ourselves is wrong or bad or shameful or broken, it is no longer about us. It is no longer a conversation about who we actually are. It is no longer a conversation about an actual fundamental part of ourselves. It is no longer a conversation even about what is pertinent in reality in terms of what we need to find happiness or health or peace or any of these things. It is now a conversation of projection and perception and an understanding that generally probably has nothing to do with real reality, or it's a bit of an understanding of reality with a false concept of how we're going to get to a better place. Okay, so when we're children, we all understand this now. When our caregivers are our caregivers, we perceive them as being God. We perceive them as having all answers to all problems. We perceive them as having all access to all resources. We perceive them as being the arbiters of reality that in that temporary reality of our childhoods, they are. We perceive that when they reject or deny or abandon or shame a part of ourselves, that they are doing that for a good reason. They are doing that because it is true and it is right that these parts of ourselves are bad, are wrong, are shameful, and that we have to reject and deny and abandon them ourselves. Because again, they rejecting us, abandoning us, shaming us, denying us, being the beings that hold the key to absolutely everything that we need, and being the beings who are teaching us what reality is, who are giving us our perceptions, who are giving us our understandings of the reality that we live in. We, again, fully and completely rely upon them for everything. And because of that, when they reject, deny, shame, abandon, scold, guilt, hopelessness around any aspect of ourselves, that is automatically going to read to us as this part of me is an existential threat. This part of me is bad, it is wrong, it is negative in some way, and I need to get rid of it, I need to fix it, I need to change it, because that is the way that I get back into safety. That is the way that I get back into being in alignment with what my caregivers want and need me to be, so that they will provide for me. Because always across the board, as we're children, our behavior is the only thing we have control over. We cannot alter our reality. We cannot meet our own needs. We can't do anything. We are fully and completely dependent upon our caregivers to love us, to empath us, to understand us, to give us everything that we need. So in that reality, when our caregivers shame, blame, guilt, deny any part of ourselves, we have no defense against making that just true reality. They are rejecting, shaming, denying, abandoning these parts of myself because they are bad, wrong, shameful, guilty, fundamentally not good. And they are an existential threat to us, because any part of ourselves that gets us disconnected from our caregivers, any part of ourselves that doesn't connect us to our caregivers, are then going to be read very naturally as these are fundamentally bad parts of myself that I must fix in order to return to safety. Yes? And again, we're going to make up reasons for why it makes sense that our caregivers rejected these parts of ourselves. And our caregivers are going to give us reasons for why they're rejecting these parts of ourselves, why they aren't meeting our needs, why they're shaming us in our emotions, why they're abandoning us in our way of being, why they're telling us that how we are is wrong. And all of that is going to be starting to be formed as our perception of self. These are the good parts of me. These are the parts I have to get rid of. These are the parts I have to change. This is good. This is bad. This is right. This is wrong. And again, on top of that, our caregivers are telling us what reality is. Our caregivers are telling us this is how you have to be. This is what you have to do. And that's all getting read as, in order to get my needs met, in order to be safe in this reality, in order to have pleasure and escape pain, these are the characteristics I have to own. These are the characteristics I have to abandon. You see? And all of it is going to be completely logical. This is who I am. This is what I am. And what they are telling me about reality is true. These are the ways that I have to be, and this is all about me. Right? We are not going to have any perception in our childhoods of our parents being flawed human beings who are going through their own stuff, having their own perceptions, having their own traumas, having their own everything that they're going through, that might mean that what they're abandoning, rejecting, shaming in us aren't actually bad things, but rather it's our caregivers' faulty perception. It's our caregivers having selfish needs that our ways of being go against. It's our caregivers projecting their trauma onto us. It's our caregivers' misunderstanding of reality. Okay, that's half of it. The other half of it is sometimes the way that our caregivers were behaving towards us in not getting our needs met, not meeting our needs, just abandoning us, shaming us, or like I say, in general, just not being able to make things better for us where we needed them to be better, had nothing to do with anything other than our caregivers didn't know, our caregivers didn't have access, our caregivers didn't understand, and they were busy that day, they were having a hard time at work, they were going through stuff in their own personal life that we had no perception of, and so their behavior towards us may have had literally nothing to do with us. may have had absolutely no, it was not a reaction to us or how we were behaving or what we were doing. And yet, of course, because our one perception is caregivers are God, they have access to everything. If they're hurting me or abandoning me or shaming me or not meeting my needs, it is because of me. We are going to come up with a reason for why whatever we just did or whatever we are doing or whatever we're not doing was the reason our caregivers didn't take care of us or hurt us or harmed us in any way. And again, that's going to get wired in as existential threat to me, something about me, this is how reality actually works. And part of the maturation process, as you've gone through the process of awakening to reality and you've grieved for these younger parts of yourself and you've gone through the catharsis stage, at least to some degree, of being upset, right, about your caregivers not meeting your needs and not being perfect for you and harming you in the ways that they've harmed you and hurting you in the ways that they've hurt you, and as you're processing through all of that and allowing yourself to have that emotional experience of being sad and being angry and being disappointed in them and really letting yourself blame them for pain that you've been blaming yourself for a long time, that's super important. And it is really important that you go through that and you allow yourself to be angry with your caregivers and you allow yourself to be sad for yourself and you allow yourself to go through that I just needed you to be better for me and you weren't process. Okay, so do not try to skip to this because that would be premature forgiveness. So I really want to put that out there. If you have not gone through the phase of just being upset with your caregivers so that you are learning how to stop turning that anger and that sadness in on yourself and in on these parts of yourself that got you abandoned, rejected, and shamed, and you're starting to say, no, that was their fault. I'm mad at them for not meeting my needs. I'm mad at them for not understanding me. You need to let yourself go through that. And that is a very important part of the process. And it's not necessarily a part of the process that ends as you start doing this work, okay? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next video. But when you start to get to a point where you've grieved your childhood quite a bit and you've been upset with your caregivers and you've been sad and you're getting to this point of like, okay, I'm starting to let myself expand into things that I haven't done before and I'm starting to embrace parts of myself that I've rejected before and I'm finding freedoms that I haven't had before and all that stuff. You're getting to that place. This next phase is the next phase where you start to realize all the ways in which your caregivers were projecting onto you and it wasn't actually about you. This is when you can start to look back on where your caregivers were in their lives during your childhood and how their behavior towards you may have not been a reaction to you specifically, but rather it was them being overwhelmed. It was them not knowing what to do. It was them having their own shit going on in their lives that made them react and respond to you in ways that your mind created a story. It's like, it's because I was too loud, so being loud is bad. I was too obnoxious, and being obnoxious is bad. I was too needy, and being needy is bad. When really what was happening was caregiver was overwhelmed at work, was stressed in their relationships, was having a hard time in their personal life, and they just had no capacity to make room for you. And it literally would not have mattered if you were the most quiet person on the planet. They still would have been irritated with any noise you made or anything that you did because they were in a place where they couldn't handle it. And you can start to see that, like, you were a child and it was normal and natural, completely normal and completely natural to express your joy with a loud laugh, to cry when you got hurt, to make funny jokes and to do all the things that you were doing. And it was never that there was anything wrong with that behavior. right? Like you may have been trying to make yourself quieter and smaller and all of these things for your whole life because that trauma of your caregiver being totally irritated every time you were loud or obnoxious or made a noise, that got registered in as this loud, obnoxious part of myself is wrong and bad. When in real reality, caregiver was overwhelmed. It had nothing to do with you. And you were just being a natural human being. And so you can start to say, okay, this wasn't about me. It wasn't her, right? My caregiver's behavior towards me was not about me. If you were shamed or guilted for being anything, for any of your needs, for any of your emotions, for any of the ways that you were perceiving your reality and expressing your perceptions, for any personality characteristic, I want you to understand that to a degree, it wasn't about you. Because there was whatever your caregivers were going through. And then on top of that, you can start to look at the conditioning your caregivers received. What was it that they were taught was the right and wrong way to be, the good and bad way to be, that they were then projecting onto you without processing it or questioning it or seeing if it was true in real reality? So we're going to talk about that more in the next video, but just to plant that seed now. So the first thing is, where was your caregiver's behavior not actually about you, but was what they were going through in their own life? Where can you start to understand that the things that your caregivers rejected or abandoned or shamed in you wasn't about you, but rather, again, it was their lack of understanding, their lack of resource, their own overwhelm, their own what they were going through in their lives. And the point of looking at this is, again, to start to peel back these layers of consensus reality not actually being a true rejection of you. It's all perception that we're making up as a humanity as we go along that may or may not have anything to do with real reality. And then again, right, we're going to get into, you may have been rejected or abandoned or shamed in harmful behaviors, in actually truly harmful ways of being. And it can seem like, well, that was right? Like that shame, that guilt, that rejection, that is what they should have done because these parts are really actually bad and causing harm. And to that, I will say, even to that, in real reality, if there are parts of you that are causing harm, those are parts that are acting from misunderstanding and trauma and pain that need to be understood, that need to be loved, and that need to be supported in their growth. It was never pertinent. It was never important. It was never true that any part of you was bad or wrong or guilty or shameful, or that there's actually something fundamentally wrong with who you are. The only truth is that that was projection of a misunderstanding of how to support you, or a simple lack of resource, or your caregiver is trying to prepare you for the world and consensus reality at large that wasn't going to be supportive for you. So where can you start to just look a little bit at how your caregiver's behavior towards you may not have had anything to do with who you are fundamentally, and everything to do with where they were at in their lives and the conditioning they had and the programming they had and what was going on with them. So that you can start to say, these parts of myself weren't even parts that were actually being rejected or abandoned. It was just a projection, because these parts are not the reason why my caregivers couldn't love me or care for me or whatever. It was their own stuff. Can we start to make room for that? Okay, and we'll take it deeper in the next video.